But more times than not, when I watch these videos that end up with someone losing their life, someone getting hurt, an officer using like a controversial use of force, a majority of times it's the officer was legally doing what he or she was doing, but the person was not complying. Now, with that said, I do understand that just because somebody resists or just because somebody doesn't comply, that doesn't mean we could use whatever amount of force we want to based off of that.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of It's Needed Podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I'm joined today by light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, it's the Popo.
You got your Barry White voice on today, man. I might have to make mine a little deeper just to keep up with you.
Bruh. Hey, Billy, can you turn my snare up a little bit? Because I can't even hear myself. Oh, man. There we go. And we're also joined by the Savage himself. What's going on, Billy?
Doing well.
Oh man,
I don't know if anybody believed that. How you doing, Billy? Doing well.
I tried to make that one happy too.
Oh man,
you tired, Billy?
Yes, yeah. We had our second baby, and he's not a sleeper yet. So we're tired, but we're chugging along.
Oh, hey, I can relate. Look, my son was like super colicky, so I mean, it took probably 3 months.
Yeah, bro.
I'm not saying that. I'm not wishing that upon you, but I'm just saying, like, I feel your pain,
bro.
I definitely feel your pain.
And because during the day I'm trying to be more helpful, so I'm working at night, and then he's also not sleeping at night, so it's kind of like this perfect storm of no sleep.
Bro, that's probably
he's healthy.
That's probably the worst part about having a new child, bro. Is just the sleep part, the lack of sleep. You know, so.
I also like how no one tells you like leading up to having a kid, when it's your first, like everybody's like, oh, it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's the greatest, blah, 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 which it is. But no one like tells you like that first 6 months to a year, boy, you better hold on. Bro. So I was caught off guard. I was like, I mean, there was one point where like me and Shelby were sitting on our like sectional, and Tristan was just screaming because that was just his baseline when he was born for the first 3 months. And we just stared at each other and started laughing. And it's like 3 a.m. We're just like cracking up. Like, what do we do except laugh at this point? Like,
and then it's funny, you talk to the people, the parents that are like, oh, yeah, my kid never cried. And they're like, what? Until I got my third child, which Rylan, bro, she slept from the time we left the hospital all night.
Oh, see, that's love. That's love.
I told
right
Bianca
there.
any comments made between 2 and 5 a.m., they just don't count. You know, I keep leaving the wipey warmer open. So like 3 a.m. she's like, babe, the wipey warmer's open. I went over there and like slammed it shut.
A wipey warmer? I didn't even know. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it just keeps them nice and warm, so it's not like bothering your baby when you clean them.
We got one, but we didn't use it. We had one of those.
So to our listeners out there, that's what bougie people buy is wipey warmers.
No, it's Amazon, like $13. You get them.
Nah. So, but yeah, no. So congrats on the new baby, Billy. That's phenomenal, man. And we are back, guys. Last week was the first time in almost 2 years that we haven't delivered you guys a podcast episode. You know, when we were supposed to, and it was just a difficult week. We tried to plan on it, and it was funny. The planning was terrible, actually, because
the planning was not there.
So just so you know, we had originally planned on doing a podcast, and so it wasn't until Sunday evening that we were like, wait, hold on, like Billy's baby is getting induced, or Bianca is getting induced tomorrow, and then I'm flying a red eye from California to Florida on Sunday night. So when do we plan on doing this podcast? And so that's when we realized, like, you know what, it's going to be hard. And so please forgive us. We don't want to make that. It's not going to be common practice. That's not going to be the norm. You guys will always have episodes. But last week we devoted to our families, and you know, like, families is a priority. And so we wanted to make sure that we you know, spent that time with our families, and every now and again, that's what we need to do. Can you turn it up a little bit more, bro? My voice is killing me, bro. I'm sorry.
It's killing us too, man. It's killing us too.
Yeah. So about my voice, I 4 days in. No, so it was. Yeah, I guess it was 4 days into my trip. It was Thursday that we were at Epcot, and my voice start going out. And my kids have never actually heard me or when my voice has gone out. And so they were tripping out. But it's not because I think it's just I have this bad sinus thing going on, man. And my sinuses have been messed up. Perfect. Thank you, Billy. My sinuses
Don't lie. You were screaming on all the little kitty rides. You was like,
right.
wee!
Right.
You lost your voice.
You're right. I was screaming on It's a Small World. So so I lost my voice on It's a Small World. But anyways, my voice is just barely now starting to come back, but it's terrible, especially when you do what I do. I mean, as far as like my world outside of police work revolves around speaking. And so when you lose the one thing that actually helps you get your content out, which is your voice.
I'm here to motivate you today.
I know, bro. It's so difficult.
Don't let nothing stop you.
Oh, man. Oh, man. But it's difficult. But anyways, I'm back. So my next few pieces of content, if you guys follow my BBU account, you'll hear the raspy voice. And it's kind of funny. So on the trip, I think I told you guys this, but I want to tell our listeners. When we got to the airport, as soon as we pulled up, we came across some LAPD or LA airport police officers, and they recognized me, which was cool. They were like, hey man, we listened to your podcast, we love your podcast, we appreciate you, and they wanted a picture. So that was cool, man. It was really, so shout out to you guys who came up to me and said what's up, man. I really, really appreciate you guys. AJ does, and so does Billy. But I think I think the most funniest thing about that encounter though was as soon as I got done taking a picture with them, some lady and her daughter walked up to me, were like, can we take a picture too? And my wife, being my sweet wife, she was like, oh, do you guys listen to the podcast and stuff like that? And I'm like, and I told my wife, I was like, babe, they don't listen to the podcast. They're in LA and they saw somebody taking a picture with me.
They thought you were a football player.
They assume I'm a football player. I'm too small for a basketball player.
Nah, they like lacrosse or something.
Oh, so now you got to play
tennis.
Polo.
They thought you was a tennis player.
For sure.
Professional tennis player, y'all. So they're in LA and thought they were Dancing with the Stars. And so AJ, he was hilarious. AJ was like, man, some lady got a random picture of some random guy hanging up in her living room right now. So, but no.
At least it went that way though. I was at an event where like it was like a law enforcement event, and I showed up and I was just trying to do like an in and out, right? Like I was showing up, I was going to take a couple of pictures with like the person who put it together, then I was going to be out, right? Like share some words just privately with him. I showed up and like people like spotted me and they're like, oh, let me get a picture. So there's like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 people like in line to get a picture. So I'm doing the picture thing. I get done and I like slide behind a cruiser, and like this older woman with like her granddaughter walks up to me and she goes, hey, who are you? And I was like, what? Like, what kind of question is that?
Man,
I couldn't even come up with a good lie.
Have you ever seen that commercial, the Mr. Clean commercials, man?
I'm the reason your house is clean.
Have you seen any of the Fast and Furious movies?
Oh, man.
Oh, y'all gonna jump me? Y'all gonna jump me, Weenie?
Oh, man. So, but yeah.
So
go ahead.
How was it?
What I was going to say, though, real quick is I want you guys to know that me, AJ, and Billy, we really appreciate when you guys do stuff like that. I'll never.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll never be a point where, I'm big time and bro. Like that stuff truly makes me appreciate you guys even that much more and the work that we do, because I know it's impactful. And so I want you guys to know I appreciate it. If you guys ever see me or AJ or Billy, don't ever hesitate to come up to us, say what's up to us, because that's what it's about. This is a family podcast and you guys are all a part of the family. So I want you guys to act that way or treat it that way. So
but I even told Ryan, I said it always catches me off guard when someone mentions the podcast, like off rip, like, oh, I love the podcast. I listen to the podcast. It's just like, it's that immediate connection opposed to where like, oh, I see you on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook, which is cool, right? Like, I love it. Let's take a picture. Let's talk a little bit. But when you say the podcast, it's just like that intimate connection. Like, oh, boom. Yep. Let's take a picture. Let's chop it up a little bit. So, hey, you're absolutely right.
Exactly. So there's been a lot that's actually happened since the last time we did our podcast. A lot between the George Floyd trial that's going on, or Derek Chauvin trial. I guess I'll say Derek Chauvin trial. And then we had some recent killings by police with members of the community. So I know we mentioned that we were going to do a huge breakdown of the George Floyd trial, or the Derek Chauvin trial, and we're going to spend a little bit of our time there this morning. But at the same time, we usually don't try to go past an hour, 15 minutes on this podcast. And so to say that we're going to do a full breakdown of that trial today, I would be lying, just because there's other also pertinent events that we cover. And so we'll get to those other pertinent events here in a minute, but I do want to spend a few minutes on this trial because I think we are the jury is in deliberation as we speak. And the next few days are going to be very, very crazy, needless to say, in our country. And so I wanted to spend some time there and hear your guys' views and hear your views on what you think is going to happen, AJ.
Man, I think it's going to be a hung jury. I think they're going to be like split, 50-50. And the reason I say that is a lot of what I've seen on like mainstream media has been like slanted reporting. And I'm talking like on all like Fox, CNN, all of them, right? They just really haven't been like getting all the details out. And like just from watching the trial and prepping for the podcast that we were going to do, or the episode that we were going to do, breaking down the trial, I just learned that there was like so much more that was going on during the trial that really wasn't hitting like mainstream media, at least not that I seen. So those jurors are listening to what's going on there. So they have that information. It's just kind of scary that it's almost like the world's being prepped. Like, oh yeah, like they're going to throw the book at him. He's going under the prison. And if that doesn't happen, it's just like, well, we gave you all the information to where realistically they didn't. So I think, and I'm hesitant saying this, but I'll just say it because I believe it. I think no matter what, like there's going to be riots, protests, and demonstrations. If he gets convicted, the conviction won't be harsh enough, or they're not going to stop until laws are changed. You know what I mean? Like it's just there'll be something, and of course, if he's not convicted, then the world will burn for a little bit too. But it's just I don't know, man. Like I don't want to go on like this whole like media or like propaganda kick, but and I'm not going to go off course too far here, but here in the city of Columbus, we had 2 officers assaulted by a person. 2 officers show up on a knife run. As soon as they show up, the guy has a backpack on. One of the officers walks up to him and says, "Hey, drop your backpack. I want to pat you down." And the guy like plays possum. He drops the backpack, like everything's cool, and then throws this wild haymaker, hits the officer in the jaw, breaks his jaw in 2 places, runs around the cruiser, starts attacking the female police officer. As soon as the officer gets hit, he goes, he hit me. So he runs around, tases the guy. They wrestle around with him for a little bit, get him in custody. And I read the headline in the news when that hit. And the headline said, "Man arrested for allegedly punching police officer." And I was just like, what? Like, it's on film.
Yeah.
And he narrated it. He said, "Pow. Oh, he hit me."
Yeah.
Like, so it's just, it's just that's really magnified during this trial. So I think it'll be a hung jury, which I think at that point it goes to the judge. I'm not 100% sure about that. So that's my prediction.
Well, and that's the dangers of really basing everything off of our emotions. And we've talked about this so many times. So it's like almost like a broken record. But when we just base everything off of our feelings and emotions, then it really kind of numbs us to what facts are. And the facts don't even really matter at that point in time because I'm so invested in this emotionally that if I hear something to the contrary of what I want to hear, then it just makes things that much worse. And I think that's what we're going to see in our country is, we talked about it on the last episode, but our country was really just changed by this whole George Floyd thing. And when the facts come out on certain things, it's really going to alter a lot of people. Now, I will say, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, like, I think that, why do I think Derek Chauvin was wrong? I think he was wrong just because I think he could have showed a little bit more compassion and empathy and tried to at least appear that he was going or try to help him out, you know what I mean? Or recognize. But a lot of the things, if you guys have watched some of the witness testimonies and from some of the, seasoned officers that have experience and things like that, some of the testimonies have been saying like, hey, it's not uncommon. And I've said this before, it's not uncommon for police officers to deal with people that, will lie to us all the time about them not being able to breathe, them saying, hey, I suffer from, claustrophobia, whatever it may be. It's not uncommon to hear that because they're trying to avoid arrest. And that's exactly what the defense brought up is like, hey, look, this is normal stuff. And so when you hear that as a police officer, it kind of makes you second guess, like, this dude's probably lying to me. And again, this has to be this trial, and what comes from this trial, a lot of it is going to be judged from the eyes of an officer with similar time on, with similar experiences, and it can't be judged from the hindsight 2020 angle, because there's a lot of other things that either he did know or he did know or he didn't know. And so that's important to realize when we see some of the facts come out, because that's one of the things that stood out to me when I was evaluating some of the testimonies, is that, hey, in his mind, he was just making this crap up to avoid arrest. And is it reasonable for another officer to do that? And it is reasonable. I just think that he should have turned him on his side, checked on him, at least said, hey, are you okay? Are you breathing? And stuff like that. And if, at the moment that they realize that he is moved from not necessarily is moved from non-compliance to a medical emergency, that's where I think the lapse of judgment was. And I think that's where I think there should be some type of fault placed on Derek Chauvin, but not necessarily having an intent to kill George Floyd, because you can't determine that.
Yeah. I will say this: no matter what the verdict is, if you're listening to this or watching this somewhere, you can't have a knee-jerk reaction, because I feel like we live in a time right now where like everything's like so knee-jerk. Just the female officer, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a few, who pulled her taser out, or who pulled her gun out thinking it was her taser, and shot and killed that young man. Now they're like trying to create a unit that does traffic stops without firearms. And it's just like, that's so knee jerk and ultimately going to get more people hurt. And it's just like, we have to think clear. And it's for both sides, right? Like if he gets convicted and you think that he should have been convicted, don't make any knee-jerk reactions. Vice versa, right? Like if he doesn't get convicted and you thought he shouldn't, don't make any knee-jerk reactions. I don't even know if I said that right, but anyway, both sides of it. Like, don't go out here and, yeah, we knew it, we knew we were right, we knew he was wrong. Like, just relax, let the system run its course, and what happens, and we can learn from it. Just don't make that knee-jerk reaction, because more times than not, those can be more detrimental than not.
Yeah, and so that being said, let's transition a little bit. And like I said, I don't want to spend too much time with the George Floyd trial this episode, and we'll definitely revisit it once the jury comes back, just because it'll be good. It would definitely be worth discussing how they got to that point. But there was just so much that occurred over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. It almost feels like we're back on this roller coaster that we went on as soon as George Floyd initially happened. And
you ain't lying.
And so, well, let's start with that whole scenario or situation where the officer shot the suspect thinking that she was using a taser. And so I actually that was Dante Wright. And so there was a few tweets that I made recently, and I'm gonna start with the first one and then we'll break it down from there. And I want to discuss these tweets because there was a lot more feelings and emotions that I had with facts behind these posts that I made. And so I want to really talk to them openly. So the first one I said, people have asked my thoughts on Dante Wright. My thoughts are simple. How would I feel if someone killed my son accidentally? We have to own this one. We can talk about the non-compliance piece later. And so this is what I meant when I said that. The reason I said we have to own this one is because as police officers, I'm in the one profession where I really can't afford to make a mistake. Do I understand mistakes happen? And do I hope that I'm never that person that makes a mistake? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But I'm in the profession where I can't afford for a mistake to happen. That's why we train that's why we train so hard. That's why we take so many hours of classes to make sure we could try to avoid these mistakes. And then in the second part of that tweet, when I say, let's discuss the non-compliance piece later, I wanted people to realize, like, I'm not brushing over Dante Wright's lack of compliance with law enforcement. I'm not doing that. And I think some people took that. Some police officers took that as I'm brushing over the fact that he was non-compliant. No, I'm not brushing over that. I'm simply saying that as a police officer, we have to be able to say, you know what? Yes, she made a mistake. And because she made a mistake, we made a mistake as police officers, because Was her intent to kill Daunte Wright? No, her intent wasn't to do that. Her intent was to stop him and gain compliance and take him into custody successfully. And because that didn't happen and because she killed him, that means we are wrong. And so that's why I say, let's just stop for a second. Let's stop. Let's not talk about Daunte Wright's non-compliance. Let's just focus on us being sorry to the community and the public that puts their trust in us before we go and talk about his non-compliance. What's your thoughts on that, AJ?
This is a tough one. There's no denying she made a mistake, a fatal mistake, and should definitely be held accountable for that. But I definitely do see. I'll say this. Anytime I see a video, people send me videos all the time. Every day I'm getting bombarded with videos, which is cool, right? Because I want to see what's going on out there. People send me videos that never catch wind, right? Like, oh, just check this out. And I'll kind of skim through it. But I get bombarded with so many videos that it's kind of to the point where I'll watch the beginning part. I'll skim through a little bit. I'll see the use of force or whatever, like the meat and potatoes of the video is. I'll skim through until it ends. And then I'll kind of make my judgment off of that. So, when somebody sent me this video, I did the exact same thing. And I always ask myself 2 questions first. The first question is, was the officer legally doing what he or she was doing? The answer is yes, right? Like they conducted a traffic stop. They were trying to detain him, arrest him, or whatever. They were legally doing what they were supposed to do. Then the second thing is, was the suspect or the person involved compliant? And more times than not, when I watch these videos, and we'll get to the force, excessive force, rightful uses of force here in a minute, so don't write me off yet. But more times than not, when I watch these videos that end up with someone losing their life, someone getting hurt, an officer using like a controversial use of force, it's always, a majority of times, it's the officer was legally doing what he or she was doing, but the person was not complying. And then it's kind of a domino effect. Now, with that said, I do understand that just because somebody resists or just because somebody doesn't comply, that doesn't mean we could use whatever amount of force we want to based off of that. So I completely understand that. And that's what I mean. Like, she made a mistake. She needs to be held accountable. But my issue was, a majority of the messages I received was, well, she did that on purpose.
Yes.
There ain't no way that she didn't know she had a gun in her hand instead of a taser. Let me clear the air right now. Let me clear the air, and hopefully you know me enough to know that I'm going to keep it real, right? I full-heartedly believe that she thought she had a taser in her hand. There's a thing called condition black. And it's where your mind is just on autopilot. So many things are going on. And we talked to Henner, and we talked about the amygdala hijack, right?
Amygdala hijack, yep.
And it's the same principle, right? Like, your body is so worked up, you're just on autopilot. And I've seen people do crazy things that have made no sense in situations like that because they're in survival mode, right? And even though the situation might not seem like it's warranted to position your body into that survival mode, for some people, it is. And we have to understand that everybody has different backgrounds, threat levels, and we talked about that with Henner as well. So I do believe that she thought she had a taser. She said, taser, taser, taser. Then when the gun went off, you heard her go, oh, crap, I just shot him. And everybody's like, whoa.
And not only that, I want to stay right there for a second. It's been scientifically proven that when you go into that condition black, and I even talked about this on our officer involved shootings episode, your senses, our mind does crazy things, and your senses are going to amplify in certain areas, but then they're going to go down in certain other areas. For example, your vision might, like when you hear people say like, somebody pointed a gun at me and the gun just blew up and got this big. Well, that's because physiologically your pupils are getting dilated because your brain, that caveman mentality is like, oh, danger, danger, danger. There it is. And so you'll see the eyes go, your eyes will get dilated, but then you'll also hear that same person say, my hearing kind of went down, which happened in me and AJ shooting, where it seemed like if I were to go outside and shoot a gun right now, that gun is going to be so loud that my ears are going to be ringing. But in that situation with OIS, it actually, my hearing actually lowered because my brain is telling me like, hey, look, you don't need that much hearing right now. You need vision right now, like you're really spider senses. And so the same thing with that situation is it's very easy for a person to go into that position black or that amygdala hijack and almost lose a sense of, you know, a weight distribution from a handgun to a taser. And that's not uncommon. And so when people say, oh no, she meant to do that. No, and the reason I could say that is because she is not the first person that has done this. There have been countless times where people have gotten, you know, confused with a taser and a gun. And so we've all seen that before. And if we've seen it before, that goes to show that it can happen to anybody. And so that's the last thing I wanted to highlight with that is that I hate when people say, and there was an officer that went out there and made a video, and I'm not a big fan of it because he was like, this is a gun, this is a taser.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he's like, everybody's sharing it.
Yeah, everybody's sharing it. But the thing that makes me upset with that is that's you. And you can sit here and say that you won't get confused. But the same way I always preach about everybody saying, hey, look, you don't know what that officer was going through, or you don't know what this person was going through. It's kind of the same thing that the way we have to treat this is like, just because you don't necessarily experience that or feel that or think you would be able to differentiate the two, it doesn't mean that she's not going to be able to differentiate the two, because we all experience things on an individual level. And that's what's so frustrating is like, I think this was a pure accident, no doubt about it. Like there was nothing on this that had, hey, she shot this dude because he was black, but yet we turned this into a racial thing and said, hey, look, her intent was to kill this dude when that's what it was. That's what it wasn't at all.
And the interesting thing is people believe that, man. Like people actually believe that, you know, like she did it on purpose. And like my question is like, well, what do you think like her motive behind that was? Like, do you think that she just wanted to like live in this world where she's gonna go to prison, lose her job, like always be remembered as this person? And you know, I get like answers from like every end of the spectrum, but to really break down that video, I'll say this to everyone in law enforcement or law enforcement supporters: we have to own this one. We have to own this one. She made a mistake. But to everybody else, don't turn this into something it's not.
Yeah, and that's
this video in a nutshell.
And not only that, scientifically, it's almost impossible for her to pull a gun out and say, taser, 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 and shoot him that rapidly. Like your brain, for you to do that, that's impressive. For you to pull a gun out and have knowledge that you have a gun out and have the knowledge to say and call it a taser, 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 which is how we train. That is scientifically almost impossible because we have a second and a half to perceive something and a second and a half to react to it. So that means the amount of time that she had to process and say, hey, look, I'm going to pull my gun out, but yet I'm going to call it a taser, 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 to almost make it seem like
premeditated stuff.
That it's almost scientifically impossible because your brain, unless you've been rehearsing this over and over and over again, it's almost impossible to carry out that act. And so that's why we know this was a pure accident we have to own. But at the same time, now let's move and let's use that to segue into this whole compliance piece, because not only did we can discuss Dante Wright's lack of compliance, but we can also discuss the lieutenant who did not comply with officers. And that officer went off. Okay, there's been a lot that's happened. So
I forgot about that.
Let's stay with Dante Wright first, and then let's move to that one. And then we still have to discuss the Toledo case. So when we talk about Dante Wright, could this whole situation been avoided? Could the accident been avoided? And I said yes. How could the accident have been avoided? The accident could have been avoided if Dante Wright would have complied with officers. And what's been crazy is people say, well, why are they even stopping him for window tint? And people don't realize this is that, you know, yes, that was probably the reason for the stop. But just because that's the reason for the stop, that doesn't mean that they also didn't want to stop them for more reasons. And we discussed this on our live and stuff like that. And so he knew he had warrants for his arrest. You know, this dude, anybody that I've arrested, for the most part, I would say about 80% to 80% of the time, when I arrest somebody that has a warrant, they all know they have a warrant for the most part. What happens, it's very rare where I walk up on somebody and they are absolutely clueless that they didn't have a warrant. And usually when that happens, it's a person that has never really been arrested before. They had a traffic ticket that went to warrant and they didn't know. The ones that have been doing criminal activity, they know when they're wanted because you get letters in the mail and all sorts of stuff. which is why we always see people flee from officers anytime they're going to go try to take them into custody, because they know they have a warrant for their arrest. And so if Daunte Wright complies, it never puts her in a situation or a predicament to where she has to make a decision on what force level she is going to use against him in order to gain his compliance. That never even happens if he complies. Never happens. If he complies, she never has to make the decision of whether or not she's going to pull a taser out or a gun out. If he complies, she never has to decide, hey, should I pepper spray him or should we grab? Like, she never even has to go down that road. And so how does this situation how do we avoid this situation as opposed to, replacing police officers or taking their guns away from them on a traffic stop? No, yes, it is that simple. Comply with the officer's instructions. It's as simple as that. If we want to prevent this from happening in the future, if we want to prevent mistakes like this from happening in the future, comply with the officer's instructions. It's simple as that. So that's what I want you guys to understand. I was not glossing over the fact of we're going to deal with the non-compliance piece later. I was saying specifically, as a dad, I would be very, very upset if I knew an officer made a mistake of shooting my son when they were trying to tase him. Doesn't mean I wouldn't remove any of the accountability for my son, but I would be extremely pissed off because we're supposed to be professionals at what we do. But at some point, we do got to address the compliance, and that's how we address the compliance. Go ahead, AJ.
Mm-hmm. I know I'll get backlash for this, but it's just, once again, man, like I'm gonna keep it real. And, when we talk about like compliance and, like I just have like all these other videos that are like running through my head right now. I just go back to like how I was raised. And if I was with somebody that did something and we got caught, like, or that person got caught, my mom, my aunt, my uncle, like whoever was in charge of me during that time's like first response would have been, "Oh, you shouldn't have been with him," or "What was you doing with him?
Yep.
Why was you in that situation?" Like, it was always like teaching me like accountability, right? So like, because you did this happened. If you wouldn't have did this happened. And once again, like, I'm not taking away the fact that there's like excessive force and there's mistakes made and some officers do stuff on purpose. Like, I'm not taking that away. But if we're really going to look at the problem when it comes to uses of force, right? Like if we're talking about police uses of force, and we really want to be true with across the board, how can we nip this in the butt? How can we get police uses of force as low as possible? I think we need to address compliance. We absolutely have to address compliance to the point where, and I haven't seen every video out there, but out of the hundreds of thousands of videos I've seen of police using force, there's been one where the guy was 100% compliant, did what the officer told him to do, and got shot.
Flandel Castile?
There's one. What's that?
That Flandel Castile?
No, this one was, I think it was like in Louisiana, maybe. They pulled into a gas station. The guy was like, had his hands kind of up like this.
Oh,
and
I remember
the officer was like,
yep.
"Where's your ID?" He's like, "It's in my middle console. Can I get it?" And the officer said, "Yeah." And the guy turned and the officer shot him, like, pow.
Yeah.
And then they even had an exchange afterwards. Like, the guy was like, "Oh, you shot me. Why'd you shoot me?"
Yeah, and the officer was like, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to."
He's like, "I'm sorry." Yeah. Like, that was the one video where I was like, there's no denying any of this. Like, this dude was compliant. But that's one out of thousands of videos that I've seen where it hasn't started with compliance. So I say that to say this: my children will know two things. The first of which is, don't put yourself in a situation where you have to answer to the police. Like avoid that at all costs. Not because we don't support the police, like we clearly do, but like they have other things that they should be out here doing. Like they should be chasing rapists and murderers, and like, don't put yourself in a situation where law enforcement has to put their focus on you. Just don't do that. And then the second thing that I'm going to teach them is, if you find yourself in a situation, comply. Like, I don't care how rude the officer is, how rough the officer is. Granted, if they're beating the crap out of you, or if you feel like your life is in danger, then you do what you have to do to come home, and it will work that out later, right? But other than that, like, they could rough you up, slam you on the ground, all of that, comply. We'll take care of all the rest of that later. Like, trust and believe. Like, I would much rather have my son home with me, safe, with a broken collarbone and a broken arm, than having bullet holes in him because he didn't comply. Now, granted, If that happens, we're going to take steps after that to rectify it, but we have to put ourselves in a situation to deal with that afterwards, opposed than having my son on the front of a t-shirt because he put himself in a situation to be dealt with by the police or to have the police's attention and then didn't comply. So X, Y, and Z happened.
Exactly. And so that leads me into our next topic today, and that's going to be the lieutenant that was the Army lieutenant that was pepper sprayed and pulled over. He was in Virginia, and that thing went viral as well. And so when I first initially saw this video, there wasn't a lot of context at all. And I'm going to read my comments because I want to, really discuss what I meant in my comments. I said, without knowing all the information at this point, let's focus on the focus should be on the lack of de-escalation and the failure to slow things down. And in this situation, there was definitely a lack of both of those two crucial things. Those two things, regardless of circumstances, can always stand true. As always, though, we still need to let the rest of the info come out. Remember, Jacob Blake looked very terrible, and that nothing could make that situation justified, but the facts show different. And so what I want to touch on is that the reason I said let's focus on the lack of de-escalation and failure to slow things down. Do I think that those officers lacked the de-escalation at some point? Yes, I do. There is no time frame for de-escalation. Sometimes de-escalation can take hours, and I can speak to that because I'm on our crisis negotiations team. So sometimes negotiations can take hours, and what's a negotiation? It's de-escalation. That's what it is. That's essentially another word for a negotiation. A de-escalation is another word for negotiations. Is you are trying to talk this person down from whatever they're doing. So sometimes that can take hours, and so in this one, what was the rush to get him out of this vehicle that quickly? Was it a hostage situation? Was there somebody that was getting hurt? Was there a reason to try to pull him out of that vehicle as fast as they did? And I don't think there was. And so that's why I say, I think there was a little bit of a lack of de-escalation. We kind of rushed things. And that's why I said the second point is slowing things down. Again, what is the rush? But that's not putting all the blame on these officers. These officers, I think the older officer, the one that was amplifying, because I think the second officer was actually trying to de-escalate it more. He was trying to calm it down. But the other officer, he was super amped up and hyped up. So that's one thing. That's one thing to consider. But the other half of that equation is that lieutenant in the Army, and you can see the body cameras footage that came out after of them talking and stuff like that. When you see that, he's also at fault in this as well. The reports are showing that they followed this dude for about a mile before he pulled into this gas station. So some might argue, well, why would you do that? Well, I could see the thought process. Hey, I want to get pulled over in a well-lit area. I can see that. But at the same time, how can you convey that to an officer that's trying to pull you over? You don't have a PA in your car and be like, hey man, I'm gonna pull into the next well-lit area. It don't work like that. So it's very careful. To give you some advice, if you're that person that's getting pulled over and you would rather be in a well-lit area, my advice would be this. Stop. When the officer tells you to, when they turn those lights on, stop. Allow him to walk up on you. And then at that moment in time, give him your name, date of birth, all the other stuff, whatever he needs. And then ask the question, is it possible, sir, that we can do this in a safer area? And he'll tell you yes or no. But at least at that moment in time, he knows that from the very beginning, you're trying to comply with him. Don't drive a mile away and then say, okay, and then put your hands up and say, oh, well, for what are you stopping me for? What are you stopping me for? Do you have a right to know why you're being stopped? Yes. But at the same time, if the officers are giving you clear instructions to do something, then do it. Why? Because your lack of following directions is still non-compliance. You know what I mean? Your passive, I'm not going to listen to you, is still a form of non-compliance. And so he was also wrong in not listening to those officers and doing what they were telling them to do as well. So what are your thoughts, AJ?
So there are, at least this is what I've been told, there are states or places where it is legal to not stop immediately, meaning if a cop pulls behind you, turns lights on, then you're like legally allowed to drive a reasonable amount to like a well-lit area or area where you feel safe. With that said, you have to know where you're at. You have to know the laws where you're at. Like that's your responsibility as an adult. That's your responsibility as a driver. Here in the state of Ohio, where I work, if I turn my lights on and you don't immediately stop, what's running through my head is, okay, is there a gun in the car? Is there drugs in the car? Are they running prostitutes? Is this like is there got somebody kidnapped in the car? Do you have felony warrants? Like, why are you not stopping right now? And then if you do finally stop, how is this interaction going to go? So I'm going to tell you, if I pull you over and you don't stop, you're playing the whole game where you're turning, zigzagging, or if you're just driving straight, eventually a mile down the road, you pull over, you're going to be looking at my gun. My gun is going to be out. It's going to be at the low ready, if not pointed at your car, because I don't know what's going to come out of that car. Like, you've already shown signs that you're not going to comply with my legal orders. Now my mind's racing. Why are you not complying? I can't see in the car. This ain't the movies, right? Like, we can't see everything that's going on in the car. Even what we can see in the car doesn't show us everything. We can't see you from like the chest down, right? So you can have a shotgun down there at low ready, AK-47, whatever. We just seen it with the officer who lost his life. Where was that? Down in New Mexico or Arizona, or somewhere like that?
New Mexico, yep.
It happens. Like, traffic stops are one of the most dangerous things that we go on, aside from domestic violence calls. Like, there's a reason why we do traffic stops the way that we do. And if you don't stop, there's a reason why we approach it that way. With that said, the officer that you were referring to was clownish, like straight up clownish. Like, and I don't use that word often, but like, listening to that guy, I was like, bro, you need to chill out, or somebody else needs to take charge, because you out here making it way worse. My
man said, you about to ride the lightning.
You about to ride the lightning. You better be scared. It's just like, bro, chill. Like, you not helping this out at all. Like, you at this point, you so jacked up, you jacking everybody else up. Like, at that point, it's his responsibility to realize what he's doing and take a step back. But it's also the other officers on scene's responsibility to go, chill, I got this. I'll take it. I've done it. I've been to the point where I've been jacked up and my partner has grabbed my belt and kind of pulled me back. Like, hey, I got this. It just happens. We're human, right? I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm not calling him a clown. I was saying his actions during that portion of the stop were clownish. I did see the body camera afterwards, and I thought they did a phenomenal job at talking about it. And I'm all about that, right? Hey, this is the lesson that we all learned after this. With that said, a majority of people who sent me that video were upset at the officer's actions. Very little people were upset about the use of force, and I'll tell you why. It was one of the lowest level uses of force that they could get. They pepper sprayed the guy. They ain't bust his window out. They ain't ripping through the window, slam him on the ground, rough him up. They pepper sprayed him. And once again, somebody sent me that video. I'm scanning. Okay, he didn't stop. Okay, they got their guns out. Okay, this officer's kind of crazy. Okay, they pepper sprayed him. They could do that, right? I'm with that. And then that was it. And I was like, all right, like, I'm not gonna say I'm okay with it, but I'm okay with it. Like, at the end of the day, like, once again, was the officer legally doing what he or she was doing? Yes. Was the person or suspect that was involved in it complying at the time? No. Yep. Like, you know, we have to hold each other accountable here. Like, we have to across the board. Like, and we can't make it into something that it's not, which is like happening more times than not. So, you know, when I seen that video, I was just like, you know what? If I'm going to put blame on anybody, I'm going to put blame on the Army lieutenant or the military lieutenant that was driving. You know, he should have knew better. Like, if you were that scared, like, you should have stuck your hands out the window and be like, hey, I'm not touching nothing in this car. I'm going to reach out, grab the handle, open the door, and step out that way. You see my hands the entire time. Like,
exactly.
Like, I've seen people, I've interacted with people who are truly terrified of the police, and it goes that way. Like, they're so scared. They're like, please just tell me what you want me to do. All right, get out the car. But when you got the car, reach out the window, grab the door handle, do this. And they do it. So if I'm going to put blame on somebody in that situation, it's going to be on the Army lieutenant.
So you mentioned one thing that's probably one of the most important things about this conversation is the accountability piece. And that kind of transitions me into my last topic for today is the Adam Toledo case. Adam Toledo was a 13-year-old kid. Who was hanging around with a 20-year-old kid. I call him a kid because he's still young, but he is a man. He's an adult. On paper, he's an adult. He's hanging out with a 20-year-old man, and they are shooting at vehicles. Officers in the area When they're in the area, they find Adam Toledo and his 20-year-old. They basically flee from officers, and it is a matter of seconds before an officer confronts Adam Toledo in not a well-lit alley, and he sees him with the gun in his hand, and he tells him, "Stop, put your hands in the air." Adam Toledo, he goes and puts his hands in the air, but at some point in time, he had a gun in his hand, and the officer shoots and kills him. That has gone viral because Adam Toledo was 13 years old, and so there's a lot of people in outrage over this situation. And so the reason I bring the accountability piece up is because I made a post about this the other day as well, and one of the things I talk about in that situation is that whole split second to make that decision as that officer. Mm-hmm. That officer, one, didn't know that Adam Toledo was 13 years old. I mean, he may have, but I doubt he did.
Man,
Two,
it shouldn't even matter.
Just because you're 13 years old, let me be clear real quick. Just because you are 13 years old does not mean that you are not a threat to police officers. The last time I checked, your threat level does not have an age limit on it.
You can still pull a trigger.
Oh, man. I have, being an SRO and being a police officer, some of the most dangerous people that I've ever encountered were younger. And the reason they're younger is because their brain is not fully developed. And so therefore they will make decisions like killing somebody without actually fully processing it and seeing what the long-term effects of that are, just because they're not developed. And so for that reason and that reason alone, just because you're 13 years old does not make you any less of a threat to, as an adult would. If anything, it makes you more of a threat because you don't always rationalize things. I can't remember what the scientific study said, but your brain isn't fully processed until you're like in your mid to late 20s, I think, where it basically says that your brain can actually rationalize what's good, bad, right, wrong, indifferent, all those things. So you're not into your mid to late 20s until that's fully developed. So you're 13 years old. You don't really know what's, you know what's right and wrong, but at the same time, you're not really processing it as an adult would. And therefore, in this situation, it made Adam Toledo very, very dangerous. The activity that they were doing, shooting at moving vehicles, that's a dangerous criminal activity. And so we need to place some level of accountability on Adam. We need to place accountability on the guy he was with. But I also said in that same post, and I'm going to continue to read my post just because, I haven't been able to do my videos. I want you guys to know my heart behind it. I said it's very sad that Adam Toledo died. I think we need to look back to the contributing factors that put him in this predicament rather than the incident itself. Adam was involved in a gang-enriched lifestyle that no kid his age should be exposed to. The parents have failed, the system has failed, and we as a community have failed for not giving these children other alternatives from the gang lifestyle. And I stand by that because we want to sit here and break down this incident where that officer had to make a crucial decision to choose his life over that kid's life, as opposed to going back and looking at the breakdown in the system and lapse of resources and things like that to keep these kids out of those situations and deadly predicaments.
Somebody that I like really idolize and just like look up to, and they're like a huge inspiration to me, is Tyler Perry. Like, if you don't know Tyler Perry's story, like, you got to look it up. Like, look up some of his speeches where he talks about like his story. And he's officially worth $1 billion, which that's not even the reason why I look up to him. I just look up to him. One, he's a man of faith, but two, like his body of work and how he makes sure to embody like who he is into what he does. But the reason I say that is I was listening to a speech that he was giving. And something that he said was, man, I done lost my train of thought. Hold up. Billy, going to delete this. Because, hey, I literally just had a brain fart. You just said something. You said, oh, man, he said,
the systematic
accountability.
We need to hold the community, the family, and everybody else accountable. Not just this,
Oh, yeah. I was listening to a speech that he was giving, and he talked about how important it is to introduce your kids or your children to Jesus. And what he said was, this is a hard life. You know, things are going to surprise you. You're going to hit rock bottom a couple times. There's an opioid crisis we're in right now. There's new drugs coming out that we're not even going to know anything about. They're probably going to be 10 times more addictive. And if your kid does not know who Jesus is or has never had that opportunity to meet him, then who else is he going to lean on, or what else is he going to lean on when he needs something or someone to lean on? And that just resonated so well with me. Like I love it. I love it that that's his foundation, right? Like I love it. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I can. Yep. I love it because I'm a Christian, right? Like Ryan's a Christian as well as Billy. So like that's our foundation. I love it because of that. But I also love it because he realized I have to give my kid a foundation, something that he goes back to when there's no one else around. Like he realizes I'm not always going to be here, right? Like as much as I love my son, I need to realize I'm not always going to be there for him, nor should I, right? Like you're going to have to figure things out, because when I'm when I'm gone, or if you're out of this state and something happens and I can't physically get to you, like you need to know what you can lean on and what you can't, and what's going to put you down those wrong paths. And unfortunately, we live in such a crazy world that these youth are going to these gangs because that's what they lean on, and that's what they need somebody to lean on. Oh, this is big bro. He got money. He sell dope. He is stick up boy. He does whatever. Everybody's scared of him in the neighborhood. I'm gonna lean on this life. But we see where that gets us. So you're absolutely right, and that goes back to, once again, right? Was the officer legally doing what he or she was supposed to do? Yes. Yep. Was the person complying? No. That's 3 videos right there. We just talked about the 3 hottest videos.
That's the funny part, bro. And that the commonality between all that, even George Floyd. So that's 4 things.
Man, listen, I could name video after video after video after video after video. And if you're listening to this, I want you to do it. Like be completely unbiased. Like no matter what your beliefs are, be 100% true with yourself. Was the officer legally doing what he or she was supposed to do? Check. Was the person or suspect or person involved in this incident complying? And then kind of go from there, right? Like I have a huge checklist that I do. I have a presentation on and everything, but like just those 2 things alone are the catalyst for a lot of these events that we see.
And there it is. And I think, if again, going back to my comment I made earlier, is how could we avoid all 4 of these situations that we just brought up today? If the person would have complied, if you could honestly ask yourself this question, if you're one of those person that's skeptical about police, if the person would have just complied, would we even be talking about this situation today? And if you can truly, truly believe in your heart that the officer still would have did what they did, if that person would have complied, then we might need to have a sit down conversation, because I'm almost positive that you will not be able to reach that same conclusion that we have if you open your heart. I'm almost positive you will be able to reach the same conclusion as we have. It says that, you know what? Hey, look, if these people would have complied, we probably wouldn't even be talking about these situations. And so we're short on time. I think we did a great job actually kind of, capturing this whole week and a half or 2 weeks worth of events into our episode of a podcast.
Yeah.
But we'll do more expandable breakdowns of some of these situations as they continue to evolve, specifically with the Derek Chauvin trial and some of these things that continue to garner a little bit more steam. And so, but I am glad to be back. I can't wait for my voice to be back. That's the only thing that's missing. I did tell Billy it's kind of sexy though.
Yeah, very white voice.
Do we don't have a one has to go today, huh?
I was just trying to think of one, but I will say this while you look one up. Just so you know, you being our listeners, our viewers, we are going to address the Derek Chauvin trial. Like we're going to do a whole episode on that probably next week, because the verdict will be out. We'll talk about the trial, what led up to it, what the jury had to look at, the verdict, whatever that is, and then probably the aftermath and where should we go from there. So I don't want you guys and girls to think that, we just kind of brushed it off. There was a lot that was thrown at us this past week. So, we're definitely going to come around and readdress that.
Yeah. This past week was crazy busy.
And shout out to my man Billy for the addition to the family. We didn't officially say it on the podcast, so let me be the first, my man. Even though you ain't getting no sleep.
I appreciate that, man.
All right, cool. Yep. I got a good one. All right.
Boom.
So Iron Man, Thor, Black Panther, or the Hulk?
That is tough. That's a tough one.
That's a really hard one.
I got mine.
I'm gonna go with Billy first.
Oh man. I don't know how to answer this without
Black Panther.
Yeah. I don't want you guys to take this wrong. But Iron
This is good.
Iron Man, I feel like, is the foundation of like the Marvel movies.
Can't get rid of Iron Man.
Thor is hilarious in the movies. I think he adds a really good comical just aspect to him. I love him. And I've always loved the Hulk. So I didn't really know anything about Black Panther. I'm sorry, guys. This is not a race thing. You know.
We taking this wrong, Billy.
Just for that, I'm getting rid of Captain America. Oh man.
Mine is Thor. Thor got to go.
He's so funny in the movies.
Nah, I like Thor.
Yeah, that's all right. Though I mean, but Black Panther is Black Panther is the man. Iron Man is definitely number one. When Iron Man died, I cried a little bit, bro.
Oh, yeah, man.
Every time
I was
I watch
sad
it.
for real.
Man, so I'm going with the Hulk.
No.
Hulk got to go because, like you said, Iron Man is a man, bro. Yeah, and then Thor, like the whole, I mean, his strength, like he's like the only one that can actually summons like powers, like from like lightning.
That's not
and stuff
true.
like that.
Captain America did it. He took his hammer,
bro.
He took his hammer.
Bruh.
Did he not, Billy?
I should have put Captain America in there so I could get rid of Captain America. But anyways,
hey, I'm not a big fan of him either.
Yeah. So
yeah, okay, Billy. he got on some Captain America draws right now.
Yeah. And Black Panther, man, that's Wakanda forever, bro. So that was a good one, man. That was a good one, especially for on the fly. So, but hey, guys, we appreciate you. We got to run. We got a busy morning. I literally lost my car keys last week, so
them bad boys expensive.
So we carpooled.
Yeah, we did carpool. So, and Billy has another shoot to go to. But we want you guys to know that we love you guys. We truly cherish you. If you guys like this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating, 5-star review. Not only do we read the reviews, sometimes we'll read them aloud on this podcast, but it also helps us improve on how we can deliver better content to you. And so please give us a rating on all of our podcasts. And again, we do not plan on having a lapse in weeks when we deliver this podcast episode to you. So we love you. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see y'all next week.
Peace.